I'm Dustin Grinnell, and this is Curiously.
I think people sometimes think there's something fancy or complicated or some kind of expensive device, technology that's going to solve their problems. So they do look at me sometimes with a certain degree of skepticism when I talk about getting the morning light. 9 times out of 10, they are reporting, okay, yeah, I'm doing better. What they notice first, Dustin, tends to be their mood is better, their energy is better. And sleep starts getting better usually pretty soon, but I feel like, at least in my experience with my clients, that the mood and energy picks up faster. That's a win because they're wanting that too. They're wanting a better mood and more energy during the day. I think when I'm recommending to people like where they should start, if they could only do one thing, that's the thing to try to do. And what I love about it is it's accessible to most people. It's free. And, again, starting with the basics, I think is critical with any kind of health optimization, plan. I mean, I love my gadgets, don't get me wrong, but without those fundamental practices in place, those gadgets aren't going to work as well. So really kind of think about, I kind of have this phrase, the basics before the biohacks. Let's really dial in the basics and then weave in these other interventions if you want more sleep optimization.
That was Morgan Adams, a certified sleep coach. For years, she had trouble sleeping, and nothing helped. Doctor after doctor gave her the same advice: just relax, go to bed earlier. But it wasn't until she dug into the science of sleep herself that things started to change. After 2 breast cancer diagnoses forced her to take her health seriously, Morgan became a holistic sleep coach and created her SleepEasy Method. Now she helps people escape the insomnia trap and finally sleep well again. Most of us already know the basics about getting good sleep: creating a bedtime routine, avoiding screens, keep our room cool, steering clear of caffeine or heavy meals late in the day, and so on. And yet 1 in 8 Americans has chronic insomnia, and over half report frequent sleep difficulties. So what's the disconnect? In this conversation, I explore that very question with Morgan. Together, we dig into what's really getting in the way of good sleep, the misconceptions that keep us stuck, and the practical, sustainable solutions that actually work. I hope you enjoy. Morgan Adams, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Dustin. Appreciate it.
So a lot of people, I think, know the fundamentals of good sleep. They know creating a regular bedtime routine, limiting screens in bed, keeping the bedroom cool. And I assume that everybody who will listen to this is smart and probably well informed, and they generally want to sleep better, but they still might be struggling. And I wanted to start off the conversation by kind of asking, from your experience, what's really behind the gap between knowing how to sleep better and actually sleeping better and getting results? Is it like truly a lack of knowledge or a lack of willpower, or are there deeper factors at play?
That's a great question. I think there's a multitude of answers for that. So I think at this point in the game, most people have the basics of sleep hygiene. I mean, I'm coming at this from, my client base are people who have insomnia, and they've typically exhausted all of the sleep hygiene. So like I can kind of speak from my experience working with that particular population. I do think that like among the general population, there are certain things that people do understand about sleep hygiene, but some things get overlooked. And I think that there's just, I don't know, like there is somewhat of a gap. I think that there's sometimes information disseminated to the public that is actually not very helpful or not very accurate. One of the things that comes to mind immediately is this whole concept of 8 hours of sleep. People are kind of drilled in this message that 8 hours is like some kind of magic number. And I think the reason why people are so attached to this 8 hours is because the National Sleep Foundation recommends 7 to 9 hours of sleep for an adult 18 to 64. So I think 8 comes in the middle. When you look at the fine print of the National Sleep Foundation's sleep recommendations, you see that, 6 hours up to 10 could be appropriate for certain people. So I think people miss that part. And I think what happens is there's a lot of stress and pressure for some people to meet that 8 hours. And I kind of understand why they're kind of putting these guidelines on sleep hours or sleep duration, rather. And I think it's because they want to overshoot a little bit to make up for the people who are really kind of burning the candle at both ends, who are like, yeah, 5 hours, no big deal. I'm totally fine. um, so the reality is that everyone has their own sleep need. Like not everyone is going to need 8 hours. Some people might need a little more. Some people might need a little less. And I think that that message, that public health message of the sleep duration, I think needs to be a little bit tweaked or changed. And I think it's starting to, because what we're finding is that the consistency piece of sleep is actually more indicative of health outcomes than the duration. And that's like a whole other thread. But I really do feel like a lot of people are misguided into thinking 8 hours is some kind of magical number that like they're going to be just completely golden if they meet that number.
Yeah, I think it's like a saying of the boomer generation, like get your 8 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
If there's that range, how do we know which is best for us? Because, I know some people can get 5 hours of sleep and be rock and roll in the morning, and some people need 8 to 9. Is it genetics? Is it lifestyle factors? How do we like know our sleep need?
Yeah, there's a multitude of factors. There is some degree of genetic predisposition. Now, I will say that, for the people who are saying, I'm doing great with 5 hours, I would question that. And basically, probably 1% of the population has the genetics for what we call short sleepers, and that they actually are adequately replenished by that 5 hours of sleep. Most people are going to need, I would say, safely 6.5 to 7. So what you can do, this is an interesting experiment for people who have the time to do this and the willingness to do it, is take a week out of your life where maybe you don't have any obligations, like maybe it's a vacation week, and go to bed and wake up at just sort of the time that feels normal for you. Like just kind of don't put any parameters on it. Sleep as late as you want. And then take like the first or the last 4 days and average the amount of hours you slept for that last 4 days. That's roughly probably your sleep need. And the reason why we're not looking at really the first 3 days is because you could potentially be a little bit sleep deprived. And so you're getting some catch up sleep. So those first 3 days might be including a little bit more sleep to make up for that accumulated sleep debt. That's just sort of like a rough and dirty way to kind of assess like how many hours we might need. But again, it's really going back more to the consistency piece. What we're really looking for, even more than like amount of hours logged, is waking up at the same time and every morning and going to bed roughly around the same time every night.
Okay. So that's the hygiene sleep schedule piece of it.
Yeah, that's really, the scheduling piece is something that I mentioned earlier. It's just, I think it's going to become more part of our sleep vernacular and in terms of like sleep health messaging from a public health standpoint, because there was a very, very big study a few years ago, like actually 2023, so not long ago at all, where they looked at thousands of people. And what they found was that the people who had the most regular sleep-wake cycles had the lowest risk of mortality and chronic disease. So not to say that duration doesn't matter at all. I mean, they do. In this study, they were sort of pointing to the fact that 6.5 hours is sort of like the minimum that you would want. But in essence, you would be better off sleeping 6.5 hours with a really consistently tight schedule versus 8 hours that's kind of floppy and all over the place. So when I'm talking about consistency, I'm really talking about the same wake time and bedtime plus or minus 30 minutes. And the wake time is actually even more important than the going to bed time. And quite interestingly, if you have the same wake time every day, you're more likely to become sleepy around the same time each night. because you're building up this chemical called adenosine in your brain, which is sort of like our sleepy chemical, and that needs to be released at a certain point. So just by virtue of that stable wake time, you're going to get sleepy around the same time.
Okay. Um, I want to get more into some of those behaviors and habits a little bit later. Um, one of the things I wanted to talk about earlier on is kind of like your story a little bit. Um, and in doing some of my reading, listening to other appearances you've had, you talked about going through two cancer diagnoses and how that changed sleep from, you said, something optional to something that was foundational for you. And I wanted, if you can, say a little bit more about what that experience was like, and what did you notice in your body that made that shift so clear in your mind?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the cancer diagnosis did provoke a little bit of a sleep disruption in the beginning. When I first got diagnosed the first time, I had sort of like, I guess, acute insomnia. Not in the way that I needed to like get help for it. I mean, previously I'd had chronic insomnia, which was like a whole separate issue many years ago. Um, but really, the breast cancer experience, it didn't so much change my sleep, Dustin. It changed really my viewpoint on what I wanted to do professionally with my life moving forward. The diagnosis really was a wake up call to pay attention to my own health. And it was also a wake up call to really think about what I wanted to do in the last half of my life as far as like a job. And what I really understood was that sleep was such a crucial health aspect that so many people were struggling with. And I had kind of, I think, cracked the code on getting better sleep. During the pandemic, I had a little bit of a rumble with sleep and I was able to fix that pretty quickly. So I've been able to really, do the research on sleep and apply it to myself. And I thought, I just want to help women have better health overall. And so many women are struggling with their sleep. And that's really kind of how this whole thing took off. It was more of like a pain to purpose type of story. And I think what you'll find and what you've probably found from interviewing a lot of people in the space of health coaching is that they've had their own health struggles and they've used those struggles as sort of a platform to help other people get their healing in order.
Sure, sure. I wanted to talk a little bit about like insomnia and like get some key terms defined a little bit. And in some of your materials, you talked about like, quote, retraining the brain to break the insomnia cycle. And I was wondering if you could just kind of walk me through what that cycle looks like. And at what point does normal, like troubled sleeping turn into chronic insomnia?
Yeah. I think it's a really good place to start to get the foundational definition of insomnia on the table because I think there's just in talking to a lot of people, there seems to be like a little bit of a confusion as to what it really is. So, what insomnia is clinically, as defined by the DSM, it's trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up too early, at least 3 days a week or more for 3 or more months, and also having some kind of daytime consequences of the poor sleep, and also just feeling unsatisfied with their sleep. So 3 months is sort of the cutoff threshold for it to be chronic. Anything under 3 is called acute. And quite frankly, I've heard sleep researchers talk about this 3 month, that's officially chronic. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense, like to like define it by 3 months, but that's just what I think for coding and insurance purposes, we need to have some kind of like clear boundaries, for the billing and whatnot. But I always, urge people to not wait 3 months. If they've got like really severe struggles with sleeping, don't wait 3 months. You don't have to necessarily call a professional in at 2 weeks, but if it's going on for over a month or so, I think it's really important to look into it, get help, or do some research on it. I've talked to a lot of people who mistakenly think that insomnia only means having trouble falling asleep. Because when I go over this definition with a lot of other podcast hosts, are like, wait, I thought it was just having trouble falling asleep. So I actually have insomnia myself because they wake up at night, and they're like, wow, I had no idea that I had insomnia. So I think it's a good, thing to get the definition kind of clear for people who are not understanding.
This is probably like such a complicated question to untangle, but if you've got those three aspects of insomnia, what is the similarities and differences between their causes? And, like what's the sleep profile of someone who wakes up early but doesn't have trouble falling asleep and vice versa? Or, they're waking up in the middle of the night, but they have no problem waking up on time in the morning. Those are three different permutations.
Yeah.
Some could have two or one and all three.
Yeah. Yeah. I see people who have one or all three mixed in together. Now, this is a gross overgeneralization, but it was something that I was taught in a training that I kind of look at from a framework. It doesn't always ring true, but when we're thinking about trouble falling asleep, it's usually more of an issue of anxiety. That tends to be sort of the if I had to generalize, that sort of like the main presentation is anxious thoughts, ruminating thoughts, busy brain, can't shut it off. That's sort of the profile.
Hyperarousal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the middle of the night awakenings are really they're interesting because they tend to be mainly, now again, a generalization, they tend to mainly be rooted in more like physical or environmental reasons. So, I mean, I would venture to guess there's probably about 20 different reasons why people wake up in the middle of the night. And they vary from something as simple as, this is a little bit mind-blowing, but sometimes when people wake up at like 2:20, I'm actually literally using a client example here. A client messaged me the other day, Morgan, for the past 2 nights, I've woken up at 2:20 on the dot. And the first thing I said to her was, how did you know what time it was? And she said, well, I looked at the clock. And I said, okay, from now on, clock is hidden from view. Hidden from view. Because what happens is we often will perpetuate a behavioral loop with looking at the clock, and that kind of conditions our brain, because our brains are smart. They catch on to patterns very quickly. And so you get caught in this loop of waking up at the same time. So if you stop looking at the clock, there's a high chance that you may break the cycle of waking up at the exact same time, night after night after night. Now, that's not to say that's going to solve the whole issue, because a few days later, she emailed me and was like, I woke up again. So with her, a great example, a very poignant example is she is 57, somewhere around late 50s, maybe close to 60. And she's dealing with a lot of hormonal issues. And she's also dealing with what I'm suspecting might be a sleep breathing issue. And those tend to be quite common, both of those, obviously with women, the hormones, but sleep breathing issues in midlife and beyond for both genders can present an issue with the wake up. So whenever a client is coming to me and they're having multiple wake ups, I'm really pushing for that sleep study to see if we can rule out the sleep breathing issues, because that needs to be addressed pretty quickly.
Now, when you say sleep breathing,
yeah, I'm really pointing to obstructive sleep apnea when I talk about sleep breathing.
Okay.
Yeah,
so they're having obstructive events potentially, and you want to find out how many.
Yeah. That's sort of out of my, I know some about sleep apnea, but it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. That's really more for a doctor. But I really am very keen to screen those people, or to have them get screened and to point them in the right direction. There's other physical issues of wake ups. One that's very common in my population is blood sugar dips. So that 3 a.m. wake up can often be caused by someone having unstable blood sugar throughout the day that tracks into the night. So when you have that blood sugar dip in the middle of the night, it creates this little cortisol spike and wakes you up. So that's another reason for the wake ups.
That can be preempted by more stable, like not having as many spikes during the day.
Yeah, often we find that when we have our blood sugar balance during the day, that kind of follows into the nighttime blood sugar balance happening and can prevent wake up. So when I'm working with clients, I'm always looking at their food intake. I mean, not obsessively. I'm not like a nutritionist and tracking macros and that type of thing, but I'm looking to see that they're, having protein at each meal, that they're having some healthy fat. They're not just like having oatmeal 3 times a day or like cake and cookies at 10 p.m.
Because those would cause the spikes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, multiple reasons for the wake ups. So working with clients, it's sort of a series of troubleshooting and coming up with different experiments that we may want to do. For example, with the blood sugar dip, sometimes I'll have people have a very small snack, like an hour before bed. And that snack is a very small snack. It's not like it's not like a second dinner, but it's, higher in protein. It has a little bit of fat, a little bit of complex carbs to see if that can stave off the wake up in the middle of the night. And sometimes it does. So then we know, okay, we have a deeper issue we need to look at. And that's really balancing your blood sugar from the moment you wake up all throughout the day and into the evening.
That's really interesting. And then also, not to belabor the point of waking up in the middle of the night, but you mentioned environment too, like probably heat is one.
Yeah. But the heat. So a lot of my clients, being women in midlife, their thermodynamic or their system for cooling their bodies is a little bit off because of that menopausal issue, the estrogen decline that helps women maintain their temperature stabilization. So quite often, and with men too, even though they're not menopausal, they're still often overheating. Quite often, the culprit is a big, thick comforter. So when clients are telling me they have a thick comforter that they sleep with, I usually say, let's potentially rethink the comforter and think about like a comforter or like a bed covering that has less bulk, because that huge comforter just traps the heat so much. It's just very good at doing that. So lighter layers, like cotton muslin, kind of like bedspreads that are just thinner, are often helpful when people are overheating. We also have to think about noises in the middle of the night, like random cat noises. Our cats, they're nocturnal creatures. We have two.
Oh, yeah.
I know you have one.
Makes herself known. Yeah.
And they're like, hey, I'm playing. It's 3 a.m., but what are you doing, mom and dad? So we've got those little critters, wreaking havoc at night. We've got sirens. I mean, all sorts of random house creaks. So one of the things that people can do is mask those noises with like a white noise machine or earplugs if they feel like those are good for them. I personally can't stand anything in my ear like that overnight, so that's like off the table. But then there's also light in our sleeping environment. We really need to make sure that our sleep environment is pitch black or as pitch black as we can get it, because even just very innocuous street lamps from the outside, or even if the sun is rising early, we find that those can definitely create these little micro awakenings, which can sometimes lead to actually waking up and being cognizant of the fact that you're awake. So we, generally speaking, we want to think about our bedrooms like a cave, cool, dark, and quiet. So those are all things that, I definitely look at with my clients, but quite frankly, they have almost mastered that art of their bedroom being like a cave, because they are so well attuned to the sleep hygiene and the bedroom setup. But every now and then we'll find a little bit of a leak that we need to kind of address.
I want to talk about this anxiety component a little bit more. I guess it's the first part of insomnia. It's, getting to sleep and dealing with the anxious thoughts, the rumination. I know I've heard before people will say something like, it's almost like they develop a complex around sleeping. They have this like fear around bedtime when insomnia has gotten really bad. They say something like, "What if I can't sleep again tonight?" And then you get really kind of like nervous. So I guess how does that anxiety itself become the problem, and how do you kind of short circuit uh that issue and break the pattern, you know?
Yeah, that's a huge issue with a lot of my clients. It's really called conditioned arousal. So basically, the bed in the bedroom has become this object of projected anxiety. So they think about going to bed and they're like, oh no, not another night.
Right.
So, my recommendation for people who are going through that is that it does require a lot of comforting yourself and talking to yourself about safety and the fact that you are safe, because quite often our bodies go through this like fight or flight response. Our heart may be beating faster. We might feel overheated. And really, there's so many different techniques, but the crux of it is really reassuring yourself that your body is safe, you're safe, and that the sleep will come when it's ready to come. Like sleep will unfold when it's ready. I think the biggest mistake people make in these scenarios, Dustin, is that they try to exert a lot of effort into sleeping. They're like, I'm going to try harder. And what the reality is that effort is the enemy of sleep. So the harder you try, the harder it is to sleep. So letting go of that effort and relaxing and kind of like dropping the rope is sort of a mindset we want to cultivate with people over time. And it's really it's quite an interesting phenomenon to encounter and to help people with, because it's a process. It's not like overnight. It's not like the light bulb goes off and they're like, oh yeah, I totally get it now. It's like you have to kind of test yourself, and you have to also, what's very important, understand that despite a bad night of sleep, you are capable the next day of doing things. So quite often I will, challenge my clients after a bad night to go ahead and do the thing that they feel like they don't have the energy to do, because when they can show up the next day and they can live by their values and accomplish the things that need to be done for the day, it actually helps them the next night, because they're like, okay, I got through that on a bad night of sleep. It just gives them this softening, of that pressure to sleep, I find.
Yeah, instead of going to bed thinking, I hope I don't like wreck another day and therefore I'm not productive and then it's going to be a habit and a cycle and I'm screwed. And
Right, right, right.
I guess another thing I wanted to ask too is kind of like going back just a second, like walk me through if that experience, walk me through that process of trying to talk to yourself and make yourself feel safer and comfort yourself and give yourself reassurance that even if you are tired, you'll be able to do what you need to do. And how concretely do you do that? Is this talking to yourself? And, maybe you had a patient who did this, just kind of really thinking like, this is something I'll try later if you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so one way that I would approach this is talking to I mean, you don't have to literally talk aloud, but like kind of internally talk. Um, Talking to yourself in the third person is often very helpful. So refer to yourself as Dustin, like, because what it does is it kind of it takes you a little bit out of the situation, as if you're maybe talking to a friend, so that you're not so attached to like, okay, me, like you're taking yourself a little bit out of the equation.
Distance. Yeah.
Exactly. A little bit of distance is helpful. And then, really paying attention to the thoughts that come up. And sometimes we'll do this in a way that's an exercise, like during the day, even, is challenging the unhelpful thoughts about sleep that people have. For example, I'm thinking of one client who I had her look at or list out her unhelpful thoughts about sleep that would happen from time to time. And one of them was, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to take leave from work again. Right. So we kind of like played that out, or in her situation, she was interesting because she said, one of her unhelpful thoughts is, what if I'll never sleep again?
Wow.
And she had been through a previous bout of insomnia in 2021, and she got herself out of it on her own. And I said, well, we have evidence that you were able to sleep again because you got out of that loop of the insomnia, and it just came back. But you have evidence that you have the ability to sleep.
You've done it before, you can do it again.
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, again, getting to your story a little bit more. You wrote about having 8 years of on sleep medication, and I'm sure you learned a lot in that time period. But I want to frame the question a different way. What do you think, like doctors or healthcare professionals were missing all that time? Like, what should they have been addressing instead of prescribing pills like Ambien or others?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is a rampant problem amongst primary care doctors. And I say this, I don't mean to throw all the primary care doctors under the bus. But they have a really hard job. I mean, it is not an easy job to do. The unfortunate thing, Dustin, is that they have been given about 2 hours of sleep science training in medical school. So they're coming into the situation with not a lot of resources to offer the patient. So what ends up happening usually is that the primary care doctor will offer, a list of sleep hygiene tips, which quite honestly, the patient has usually already tried. Or they'll give them a prescription for a sleeping pill, which, I have some pretty strong opinions on that, as you might imagine, just having been dependent on the sleeping pills for 8 years. I'll use the brand name. So Ambien is probably the most common one. Something that a lot of people don't realize about Ambien is that in 2014, I believe, 2013, 2014, Ambien's manufacturers was forced to change their dosing schedule for women. So essentially, I was getting overdosed for that whole stretch of time that I was on Ambien. And I was very groggy the next morning. I felt hungover every morning. I was foggy at work. I got in trouble at work for not, I mean, I was at this point in my career, I was doing like kind of PR communications for a public health agency. And they would want me to like write PR releases on the spot. And there were times when like my boss would literally be like looking over my shoulder as I'm on the keyboard and I couldn't get the words onto the paper. It was basically the medication didn't leave my body in time. So, I mean, to think about the fact that I was driving downtown to work every morning, like basically still with the uh, impaired, it was like drunk driving every morning.
That's
I
wild.
mean, it was crazy. And then I would eat at night, those sleep eating issues. Thank goodness I didn't drive at night when I had taken the pills. But segueing a little bit onto, I think that it's I think it's okay for a physician to prescribe a sleeping pill in a situation where there's a crisis. You've had a death in the family, there's a tragedy or something very acute. But I feel like it's important for the doctor to coordinate with the patient when the sleeping pills should be stopped and develop a plan for that. That's where I think a lot of things are going wrong. Is I've worked with clients who have been on sleeping pills for like 10, 15, upwards of 20 years. And the doctors just give refill after refill because they don't know what else to do. They don't have the tools. They don't know about CBTI. So CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is actually the gold standard treatment for insomnia above sleeping pills, as deemed as effective or more effective than sleeping pills as per the American Academy of Physicians. But they don't know how to do CBTI. They haven't been trained on it, and they also might not know who to refer to. And there are not very many CBT providers nationally. So there's often a long wait list for a physician or a psychologist who is trained in CBTI. And so that's why I got trained in CBTIs, because there's a need for it. So I feel like it's something that people should know exists. I mean, half of the people that I talk to who want to work with me don't know what it is. They've never been told it's an option.
What does it involve briefly, and why does it work?
Yeah. So it's really at the crux of it, it's changing your beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes around sleep. And so what we find is that the behavior changes tend to be the most potent changes that you can make. And there are two main behavioral interventions that we work on in CBTI. And quite honestly, they have terrible names. So we're working on, different names. The first intervention is called sleep restriction. Sounds awful, doesn't it? Like if you're not sleeping well already, you're like, wait, less sleep?
Yeah, and no one wants to be restricted or constrained.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no.
I mean,
So
you worked in PR. You
I
should be on the
know.
messaging here. Yeah.
I am going to have to take a new project of renaming these things. But basically, some people are calling it time in bed restriction or sleep efficiency training. Those are more palatable terms. But essentially, what we're doing here in this quote sleep restriction is we are finding out through having people write in a sleep journal. So I have all my clients record some of their metrics into a Google Doc so that we can see kind of like when they're going to bed, how long it's taking to fall asleep, when they get up. So if what we do is we determine pretty much the amount of sleep that their body is able to produce. So let's just say they're able to produce 7 hours of sleep reliably on a nightly basis on average. What we want to do is we want to prescribe sort of a time in bed that's a 7 hour period. What ends up happening quite often to people who have insomnia is that they spend a lot of time in bed, just kind of hoping that they catch some sleep, right? So they'll maybe go to bed super early, or maybe they'll just sort of linger in bed for a long time in the morning, hoping they'll get more sleep. It's not an effective strategy to fix your sleep. So we are just really trying to match the amount of hours that they're able to produce with the allotted time in bed. And so what we do over time is we start to track their sleep efficiency. Once we've designated that time in bed restriction, we then begin to look at, okay, how much of the time are you actually asleep when you're in bed? And what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to get them asleep 85% of the time that they're in bed. That's sort of like the benchmark of healthy sleep. And once we've reached 85 or maybe even 90% of the time that they're in bed sleeping, we will sort of extend their time in bed period gradually. So if I've instructed a client to go to bed at 11:30, and then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, it doesn't happen suddenly, but gradually they've reached the 87% sleep efficiency, then what we may do is we may add back 15 more minutes in bed. So then they may be going to bed at 11:15. And then we just kind of play around with these different sleep-wake times to figure out when they're feeling their best. So quite often what I'll see in my practice is that someone will say, I need 9 hours of sleep. I just need 9 hours to feel good. And then by the time we finish the work together, they're like, okay, 7.5 seems to be the sweet spot. You kind of in doing the work, you're able to kind of figure out really where you land. That is sleep restriction. The other major technique that's from the behavioral standpoint in CBTI is called stimulus control. Again, a terribly clinical term.
It's very B.F. Skinner, behavioral science.
It's straight up behavioral science.
Yeah, yeah.
Pavlov's dog, all of it.
Right.
Some people are calling it sleep reconditioning, which sounds a lot more palatable. Basically, what we're trying to achieve here is having people only sleep and be intimate in their bed. All the other activities in their bed are kind of off the table. So no more lounging in bed in the morning for an hour, drinking your coffee and reading your newspaper. No more getting into bed early in the evening to read or watch TV. And there is this other rule with stimulus control that I don't quite adhere to. I don't quite agree with it in its essence, but you will hear this quite a bit is if you're in bed and you're not sleeping and it's been about 20 minutes, the directions are to get out of bed and do something in another room that's quiet and dim light. And then you're basically waiting till the sleepiness cues hit you again, and then you go back into the bed. Where I differ in that approach is I don't necessarily agree that you need to wait 20 minutes. Like, who said 20 minutes is like the magical number? Because what it also does, in my opinion, I mean, I'm sure that there are other people who will debate me, but this is just kind of where I land. If we're saying, okay, if it's been 20 minutes and you're not asleep, get up. Well, how do you know it's 20 minutes?
Right.
I feel like it reinforces people to look at the clock.
Yeah. And if you're that preoccupied with like timing, then you may be creating a whole other problem. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So how I instruct my clients to do this is, okay, if you've been in bed, you wake up at 3 a.m., for example, and it seems like it's been a while and you're starting to get frustrated and anxious and you're tossing and turning. It's good to remove yourself from the situation because you don't want to pair your bed with the anxious feelings. You want to unpair those two. So that's again the behavioral component is we don't want to mesh the anxiety and the bed together. We want to separate the two. So that's kind of my little spin. And I'm not the only one who has that spin. I think other people follow that as well. But from the very purist, the training that I got, they were like the OGs, from the 1980s. And they were like 20 minutes. And, I'm just not the OG kind of. I'm a little bit more flexible in my approach than I think some CBTI providers out there.
Yeah. And I like the idea of just making it a little more intuitive.
Mhm.
So another thing I want to talk about is like how daytime affects sleep, how the day affects the night. And I was hoping you could unpack this phrase, circadian rhythm optimization.
Yes.
And kind of like what we are getting wrong about daytime habits that sabotage our nights.
Yes, I love this thread. This is good. So if you think about many years ago, before, many generations ago, we were living outside. And when the sun came up, we did our daytime things. When the sun went down, we went to sleep. There was no Netflixing. There was no turning on the light. So our biology has been preconditioned to respond to those light cues. But then we have artificial light now as of, 130 years. And that's great for many reasons, but it also kind of tricks us into thinking that we can pretend it's daytime when it's nighttime by turning on all the lights at night. So essentially what's happening to us right now is we are in this situation where our days are too dark and our nights are too bright. And what we want to do is flip that. So remembering to have brighter days and darker nights is really sort of the place where we want to start. I always talk about, circadian rhythm being the foundation of good sleep. That's like a critical thing. And that's really what I work with people on in the very beginning, stabilizing their circadian rhythm, because from that, you're much more likely to get better sleep. If your circadian rhythm is all out of whack, the chances of sleeping well are almost nil. So how do we really manage this light, dark environment? Well, it starts literally in the morning when you wake up. So, everybody, if they have the ability physically to do this, is remove yourself and go outside and literally be outside seeing the natural light as soon as possible when you wake up so that you can get those really beneficial light rays around sunrise. Now, I realize everyone has different times that they get up. And not everyone, when I tell this to people, they're like, well, gosh, half of the year I sleep, until 7:30. I've missed the sunrise. It's okay. Like there's really other beneficial rays after the sun comes up, and it's called the UVA rise. And generally speaking, that happens, depending on the time of year and where you live, roughly an hour after sunrise is this time called UVA UVA rise. And it's when the sun is at a 10 to 30 degree angle above the horizon. And we have these amino acids in our eyes. And when the natural light hits our eyes, those amino acids get converted into neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin to help with energy, mood, and focus. Those rays of UVA light also help with thyroid balance and appetite regulation and a host of other really awesome things. I call it your internal pharmacy. So in a lot of circles of circadian health that I follow, some of the thought leaders, they're now saying that that UVA light is even more impactful than the sunrise light, because the sunrise light is primarily responsible for anchoring your circadian rhythm, helping you with that cortisol and melatonin pulse, helping you essentially kind of naturally boost that morning cortisol, and tampering down the residual melatonin from the night before. So don't worry if you've missed the sunrise, you still have this beautiful opportunity to get some really healing sunlight. Now, two things to remember about this light situation is number one, you don't want to have anything covering your eyes. So I see,
Glasses.
yeah, I mean, I take my walks religiously. Husband, pups, we're all out there together because even animals need to, be looking out for or they can't look out for it. We have to look out, for them, but it matters for them too. So we're all out there doing this thing together. And I see a lot of other people walking in the neighborhood with sunglasses on, even when it's quite, gray outside, overcast, they're still wearing their sunglasses. So when you have something over your eyes, that signal is blocked. You've essentially cut off that signal from happening and sending it to your circadian pacemaker. So sunglasses and glasses off. And then another question that people are always asking is, what if it's cloudy? What if, am I still like, a lot of times people have this mindset of like, well, it's really cloudy. I can't see the sun, so I'm not getting any benefits, so I won't go outside.
It's still UV rays.
You are still getting benefits, even
penetrating clouds. Yeah.
Yes, the rays, they still get through. They still benefit you. You just might need to spend a little bit more time outside.
So make this real. So I wake up in the morning. Can I take a shower, eat breakfast, then go walk around for 10 minutes without my sunglasses? Or do I need to what's the routine that people can implement? Yeah.
Well, I would actually, do it by kind of a case by case basis. Like there's an app that I would urge people to download. It's a free app. It's called My Circadian app.
Okay.
And that app actually lays out for you all of those beneficial time periods. So where I live right now, the sun is rising at 7:45. Wait, 6:45. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, 6:45. Whatever time it is. So you want to kind of plan your morning if you can. I mean, people have different degrees of flexibility that they can have during the day, during the morning. I mean, with kids and jobs, it can get really confusing and hectic. So don't overly stress about it. But if you have the ability to, look at that app and then plan your morning accordingly, I would probably say wake up, go for your 10-minute walk. If it's in accordance with that natural, light time of either sunrise or UVA, and then do your activities, your shower and your coffee. For the people who are en route to taking kids to school and to draw into work, people are like, oh no, I can't, I've got to get from point A to point B. Here's a little cheat for you. You can actually crack your window, and that actually counts because the light photons bend and it can come into your car. So you have that ability to still get the beneficial light even while driving.
And so the whole idea here is these are things you're doing during the day that help during the night.
Exactly.
Are there any other things that come to mind in that genre of things?
Yeah. So a couple other things I would point to is number one, we kind of touched on this earlier, but having a diet that's able to balance your blood sugar, starting off, usually in the morning, having a protein-rich breakfast is a really good way to stabilize your circadian rhythm. The protein is very satiating, gives you energy. So I recommend for folks to have their breakfast within like an hour of sunrise. And then having, regular meals throughout the day, like not skipping meals. I'm not a fan of, this is a really hot topic, but like I used to intermittent fast myself. I used to not eat until about 11:30 noon. And I changed my tune on that a couple years ago after I started learning about the circadian science. And now I have breakfast. And I feel like it's made a world of difference with my nervous system regulation and my circadian rhythm. So having a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner, 3 meals, protein rich. So daytime eating matters. It's really important to consider that. And then another thing that I would say is, especially for busy professionals or busy parents for that matter, who they might be staying at home, is to really consider taking some what I call mindfulness snacks during the day. So what I mean by that is taking 5 or 10 minutes a few times a day to unplug from everything, to take a walk without listening to a podcast, to sit quietly, literally do nothing. And so what happens in those moments is that you're allowing some of the thoughts and feelings to percolate that otherwise you may kind of push aside during the day because you've got another meeting. When you do this, it actually can help a lot with your sleep, because those thoughts that we've suppressed all day, they will come popping up like when you get into bed or if you wake up at 2 a.m.
I've also heard some people schedule this type of thing.
Yeah.
Like they say at 6:30, I will just deliberately worry for 15 minutes or whatever, because it's going to come up when you lay down. So just put time in the calendar.
Yep. That's something I teach my clients. It's called the constructive worry exercise. And it actually does come from, it's one of the techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So you essentially do designate a worry time. Like it's a period of time where you sit down for 10, 15 minutes and you write it all out. You brain dump, you write your worries, and then you write your next solution in solving that worry or that problem. And it is really effective when you do it consistently to get all those things out onto paper so that they're not popping up at night. And then finally, the daytime behavior that I think a lot of people overlook for sleep is exercise. We have so much data pointing to the fact that consistent exercise helps us sleep better. It's helping us stabilize our circadian rhythm. It's helping us build sleep drive, and it's helping us reduce cortisol. So, I mean, the data is irrefutable on that. So I'm always encouraging my clients to, get at least 4 days of moderate exercise into their schedule, whether that's, cardio or weight training, something that's giving you some degree of exertion.
How do you manage the flip side of that, especially with like intense exercise? Some people find that really intense exercise leaves them feeling wired at bedtime rather than tired. And I know for myself, even if I exercise at 7:30 in the morning and I do something really intense, I sort of pay for it a little bit. And sometimes not a little bit. Sometimes I'll be very wired and restless and sleep poorly. And so I didn't necessarily get the benefit of exercise because maybe I went too hard, or there's something unique about my physiology. But that's always been an interesting dichotomy. It's like it's good for sleep, but if you go too hard, it sometimes disrupts sleep. So how do we get the benefits without sacrificing sleep?
Yeah, that's a good nuanced point there. So they did a recent study showing that exercise intensely for a long duration, 4 hours before bed, is actually really impacting our sleep negatively. So we want to try to, I think the most ideal scenario from a circadian perspective is to have your exercise in the morning, to really help solidify your circadian rhythm. But I realize not everyone has that luxury of morning time exercise. hold off on the evening exercise, like if it's going to be too intense. And it sounds like your body may be a little bit more physiologically sensitive to maybe dialing it back a little bit. I don't know how hard you're working out, but maybe just notching it back a little bit
Yeah.
could be helpful. Another thing that I encourage people to think about is gym exercise or going to the gym at night. So the problem with that is that those huge, big blue lights in the gym overhead are really not good for us, so close to bedtime. And so if people are working out in a gym that late at night, I'm like talking to them about like, okay, what can we do to get you still working out, but not in the gym that late? So we may switch times, or I may even suggest wearing blue light blocking glasses to the gym. And yeah, you may stand out, but like you may create a trend among your gym friends.
That's what it takes to get good sleep, then
Yeah,
whatever. I'll wear a coconut on my head. I don't.
sure. Me too.
Yeah, it's important. One thing I feel like I couldn't, not ask about here is this whole mouth breathing, nasal breathing discussion that I feel like we're having these days. So there's been a lot of talk about mouth breathing and sleep quality. And I was wondering if I could just get you to kind of weigh in on the science here. And should people be concerned if they're mouth breathers? I am a mouth breather, and sometimes I do feel weird about it when I'm falling asleep. It's a little complex, Oh, I should be breathing out of my nose right now. And then,
Yeah.
but it feels more familiar and comfortable to breathe out my mouth. So then I fall asleep. And yeah, what are we to do about this?
Yeah. There's some shaming for mouth breathing. Mouth breathers are getting shamed left and right.
They are, yeah. It's something of a pejorative these
Yeah.
days.
I'm not really up on the latest research on like what could happen if you are mouth breathing.
I think they cause these micro awakenings is the
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely, I mean, nasal breathing is better. So, from a perspective of you're getting more nitric oxide when you're nasal breathing, it's really helping your parasympathetic nervous system work better. Here's the thing, it's like the mouth tape has gotten to be like a thing. I personally use mouth tape. I've been using it for like 3 years or so. And I am kind of addicted to now using it. And when I first started working as a sleep coach, I was talking to all my clients about it. But what I didn't realize as a newbie is that you have to really be careful to ensure that your nasal passages are working correctly before you try mouth tape. So these days, I'm not actually recommending that everybody use mouth tape until they have figured out if their nasal passages are correctly working. And you can go to an ENT doctor and find that out pretty easily. But I mean, I don't think that it's like, I mean, I could be wrong. This is again not my complete area of expertise, but I don't think the sky is going to fall if you sleep with your mouth open. I mean, it could be a bothersome thing if you wake up and your mouth is really dry and your throat is sore. That might not be nice to have. But the mouth tape, I think, can get a little bit
Yeah.
too dogmatic. Like it's not going to be for everyone. And they actually did a study recently showing that for some people who have sleep apnea, it could make it worse. So like if you have untreated or undiagnosed and untreated sleep apnea and you use the mouth tape, it could actually exacerbate your issue, which is what we don't want to do. So that's why I'm kind of like backing off a little on everyone needs mouth tape.
Yeah, interesting. So if I wanted to become a nasal breather, I could practice with mouth tape, or is there a way to do it without an intervention? Or
Well, so I the way that I started doing it was I would put mouth tape on during the day while I was working.
oh, to kind of to
You kind of
familiarize
because
yourself. Yeah,
you want to break yourself in and you want to discover
yeah,
how easily you can breathe through your nose.
right. And then also discover if your nose is unclogged and
Exactly.
address that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So nervous system and stress. You include nervous system regulation as one of your three pillars. What's the name of your sleep program?
Well, I call it the SleepEasy Method.
That's right.
So yeah, and we do address nervous system regulation to a certain degree. Some people are come in very regulated. They've already gotten these things down, but some people don't really have that. So what I encourage people to do is, start with, some of the basics that are free. I'm a real big believer in breath work. I think that's an amazing tool that we all have at our disposal. So starting off with just simple breathwork practices where your exhale is longer than your inhale. That's a great place to start because that's helping stimulate your rest and digest system, getting you more in that calm state for sure.
And this is something you can do before bed.
Before bed, I mean, I practice it before bed. I also practice it in the morning. You can practice it literally any time of day. I mean, you can be in your car and doing the breath work.
And this is like in through your nose, out through your mouth. Make sure your belly is
Yeah,
being extended when you're breathing in,
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah,
And that gets the parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system
yeah.
activated. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some really good tools out there for helping people understand breath work. One that I use personally is an app called Breath Work. I think it's got a different spelling than what breath work would be normally, but you have this ability to kind of pick from the menu what state you're looking for. Like, are you looking to ease anxiety? Are you looking to sleep? Are you looking to get energized? If you want energy, then you have like a longer inhale
Yeah.
versus a longer exhale. So there's a lot of ways to change your state of being with breath. And this app it has this sort of like little circle that expands when you breathe and then contracts so that you can kind of get the pacing correct. So I like that a lot for people who need a little bit more guidance. But just it's a free tool. Like your breath is a free tool to regulate your nervous system.
Yeah.
So I recommend it highly.
Elephant in the room. Where do our phones come in here, right? Because yeah, we talk, it's just part of life, and we know we're not supposed to be on them before we go to bed in the blue light, and it's still something we do. And some people who are heroes among us, they put them outside their rooms. We should study those people in labs. It's amazing that they can do that. But we're all addicted, it seems. Maybe not all of us, sorry, but I know I am. And how do you deal with this health in a healthy way? How do you make sure that our phone isn't destroying our sleep? What are things we can do to manage?
Yeah, it's a huge topic. I mean, we are very much tethered to our phones. It's just part of our lifestyle right now. So my approach with clients is that, I'm not really going to think it's a bad idea to, if you want to scroll for 15 minutes before bed, daylight in the day actually helps mitigate the blue light at night. So that's something that a lot of people don't know. So if you've had a lot of daytime exposure outside, the blue light from your phone is not going to be as impactful to you. I think blue light blocking glasses can be helpful in certain circumstances. If you feel the urge to be on your phone at night and you've maybe been in your office all day and haven't had a lot of daytime exposure, I'd say, try some blue light blocking glasses. There's a lot of shaming right now. I mean, I was just at dinner with somebody the other night and they were like, "You're going to be so mad because I'm on my phone at night." And I was like, "Well, tell me more." And the reality is like if you want to just check something out before bed for a few minutes, like if you just like to scroll for a few minutes, there's not going to be any harm in that. The harm is when we lie in bed with our phone and we start to scroll. Like, I don't really think it's a good idea to be in our bed and have our phone. Like, so I will sometimes scroll before bed, but I'm like in my living room, like, and it's like for just 10 minutes. I'm like, let me just see what's going on Instagram. Let's just see what's Facebook's going on with whatever. And then I put the phone in another room when I sleep. And I have found that when my clients, like most of my clients, they actually have their phone in their bedroom with them. And when they remove their phone from their bedroom, they usually tell me things start to improve because they're not tempted to reach for it when they wake up. And it just creates this nice distance because you know it's there. Like you just have it's sort of like just there in the background and you know that you could use it at any time. So to have it, it's like that out of sight, out of mind concept. So I'm a kind of a stickler for the phone being outside of your bedroom. There are some occasions where, you have a sick parent and you need to be reached in the middle of the night. Well, then there's some workarounds. You can configure your phone to only allow this number to come through. So you can create some boundaries on your own. We have situations in our life that require maybe some exceptions. So it's not like a black and white issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing I wanted to ask about too is, how do we sleep when things in our life aren't going well and we have really legitimate reasons for being stressed and worried and we're like in the middle of a storm? How do you sleep well if you're in a storm, if that's chronic stress or work problems, caregiving, financial pressure? How is good sleep even realistic in those times when we're really stressed? Like if a client came to you in a crisis, what would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, this is our life.
Yeah.
I mean, these things are happening all the time. I would say really, really be intentional about taking breaks during the day and addressing those worries, whether it's the mindfulness snacks or the constructive worry exercise. I think those are really powerful tools that we can use during a crisis. And also reminding ourselves that this is a season in our life, that this will pass. This will not be, our future forever. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's permissible for our sleep to slip up during these crisis moments. And I think we need to trust that normalcy will happen, soon, because it's not going to go on forever. But giving ourselves the grace and the self-compassion to acknowledge like that our sleep may not be great for a while, but that we can handle it, that we have the capacity to handle it, and that our bodies are resilient and will resume sleeping normally once the stress has kind of dissipated.
Right.
But it's not easy. I mean, it is not an easy task.
I sometimes, for me, just taking positive action on a problem and getting to a point of stoppage helps take away the worry. If I've done everything that I can do within my control and kind of left it all out in the field for the day, I generally won't be worrying because I know I tried everything I could. That for me is the only way to get rid of worry. I can't think it away. I really have to take action to solve it away.
Yeah.
If I can. And if I have no control, it's a very kind of stoic idea, then I try not to worry about it. If there's something in the
Yeah.
economy or in our culture or something that's affecting my life that I have no control over, I try to let it go because I
Yeah.
can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Letting it go is a very high level skill because a lot of the things that are going on right now are out of our control. We just can't. We have to kind of let go of it.
Yeah. It's in a similar area as what we were just talking about, the idea of safety. So feeling safe enough to sleep. What does that mean to you? And how do you help someone get there when life doesn't feel particularly safe?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one to unpack. There's different reasons for people not feeling safe.
Right.
Sometimes I've had people come to me who've had trauma in the past, and the trauma is somewhat of a factor in their inability to sleep. And since I'm not a therapist, I'm not trauma informed or trained, I will urge them to, reach out to a therapist to help address some of that trauma, because I think that a lot of people are dealing with trauma, which is impacting their sleep. So there's tools that I have at my disposal that are really effective that we've kind of discussed. But when trauma like that, like deeper trauma is an issue, I think it's really worth having a professional in your corner tackling that issue head on directly.
Yeah, that makes sense. As I was thinking about talking with you about sleep, the movie popped into my mind that deals with the main character who's having a lot of trouble sleeping. He has severe insomnia, and that movie is Fight Club. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie.
I have, but I don't recall the insomnia thing. Tell me more.
It's in the beginning of the
Okay.
movie. So you've got Edward Norton's character. He's not sleeping at all. And he's feeling emotionally numb. He's disconnected from others. He feels trapped in a life that feels meaningless. It's kind
Mm,
of a corporate, cog in the machine, so to
hmm.
speak. Um, and he actually goes and meets with a doctor, a primary care physician, and the primary care physician sort of invalidates his experience and says, you need to chill out, and choose some valerian root.
Mm.
And Edward Norton says, I'm in pain here. And the guy says, you want to see pain, go to like the emotional support club. I think it's for men with prostate cancer or something. And he does. And he starts getting interested in going to more emotional support clubs. And, you like sit in a circle and
Hmm.
everybody talks about their personal experience with addiction or disease or whatever crisis they're going through, like AA or something. And he finds that he can like be more vulnerable. And there's one scene where he cries. He just like bursts into tears, and he allows himself to be honest about like what he's feeling, the meaninglessness of his life, the fact that he hasn't done anything that he's proud of, and he has this kind of emotional release. And then he says he sleeps like a baby. He says babies don't sleep this well, and I was kind of wondering, you know, you're not a therapist and you don't do psychotherapy, but there's a lot going on emotionally in our emotional lives that can affect our sleep. Chronic stress and meaningful connections can help or disrupt sleep. And I wanted to just get your thoughts on like, can emotional openness or like a catharsis like that, crying in a safe environment, can these types of emotional factors restore someone's ability to sleep well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like when people are able to let their guard down, and they're able to connect with others, I feel like there's definitely, I mean, the research shows that there's a link between social isolation and loneliness and poor sleep. And I've seen this in client work. I'm trying to reflect on a few examples of this. People who are just kind of isolated, that in my experience, they've had some struggles with their sleep. People who are in relationships where maybe a marriage, for example, where they don't feel like their voice is heard, they don't feel respected. Those things, I mean, those emotional issues, they really can impact our sleep big time. And again, sometimes it requires, working with a therapist to really get down into those issues to to reach some kind of peace, because I think at the root of good sleep is, feeling safe, feeling at peace with yourself and your environment. Because when you feel that internal unrest, it's hard to rest. Really is.
Yeah, totally. What about for, in the idea of circadian rhythms, for someone working like night shifts or someone who's like a new parent or someone whose life just doesn't allow for like a perfect schedule? What do these people need to keep in mind where it's like they just can't nail the sleep hygiene that's recommended? And so what can they do to still try to sleep as well as they
Yeah.
possibly can?
Yeah. I would say if you're in a situation like that, lean in on the natural light as much as you can. That's usually pretty accessible to most people. Trying to maintain as much consistency as you can, like trying not to let your sleep wake cycle get too out of sync. And then also thinking about other ways that you can think about your health, like, the way you're eating, the way that you're moving, because those matter too. I mean, sleep is definitely important, obviously, but if you're not sleep, like I talk about this with my clients a lot who they generally are very health conscious, but they also are very worried about their future health and their sleep issues. They may have a parent with dementia. So I always remind them that, like, if your sleep is shaky, A, we're working on it, but B, you've got these other lifestyle choices and ways of living that impact your overall health, like eating well and moving your body. So it's not like it's not like your health is riding on one thing and one thing alone being sleep.
When you start working with a client, what's usually the first intervention that makes a difference? What's like a quick win that gives people hope?
The morning light. I mean, I know it sounds crazy in some respects I mean, it's like, I think people sometimes think there's something fancy or complicated or some kind of expensive device,
Technology, yep.
technology, that's going to solve their problems. So they do look at me sometimes with a certain degree of skepticism when I talk about getting the morning light. But nine times, I have a couple outliers there, but 9 times out of 10, they are reporting, okay, yeah, I'm doing better. And what they notice first, Dustin, tends to be their mood is better, their energy is better, and sleep starts getting better usually pretty soon. But I feel like, at least in my experience with my clients, that the mood and energy picks up faster. But that's a win because they're wanting that too. They're wanting a better mood and more energy during the day. So I think when I'm recommending to people like where they should start, if they could only do one thing, that's the thing to try to do. And what I love about it is it's accessible to most people, it's free. And again, starting with the basics, I think is critical with any kind of health optimization, plan. I mean, I love my gadgets, don't get me wrong, but without those fundamental practices in place, those gadgets aren't going to work as well. So really kind of think about I kind of have this phrase, the basics before the biohacks. Let's really dial in the basics and then weave in these other interventions if you want more sleep optimization.
For someone who's been struggling with sleep for like months or years, what would you want them to know that might shift how they're thinking about this?
What I would want them to know is that your sleep is definitely something that you can change for the better. You are not doomed to have poor sleep. Like, it's not a life sentence. I think a lot of people think that it's just their,
Just bad sleeper.
yeah, they label themselves as a bad sleeper. I mean, I've had several clients come to me and like one of the first things out of their mouth is, I'm a bad sleeper. And they've lived this label, and quite often they've been passed along this label by a parent. So I always tell parents, whatever you do, try not to label your kid as a bad sleeper because that label will follow them and they'll internalize that. So I do like to really think about the mindset of the bad sleeper. And I don't want to be positive Pollyanna and say like, oh, you're an amazing sleeper. But like, really, how can we change the negative thought to something that's more helpful or at least more neutral? Like, hey, I'm having some struggles with sleep, but I'm doing X, Y, and Z in hopes of making it better. And I believe that I'll be successful with that. That's a lot more useful and neutral than just, I'm the worst sleeper ever.
Have you had like a worst case scenario? Someone who said they were a bad sleeper and they were sleeping poorly and they felt like nothing would ever work. And then, a year from working with you or working on they just made a total transformation.
Yeah, I've had a few of those people who really, really were coming in very, very defeated. They were very skeptical. Some of these people have been to sleep doctors. They've been on the meds, and they were just like, well, I'm just going to see if this works. And it can take, you know, people will often ask me, well, how long does it take to get better? And, you know, some people, like I had one client recently, she turned it around in like 4 weeks. Like it was an amazing transformation. But I think, to be honest, she's a little bit of an outlier. I think it takes as long as it takes, and it can take, you know, up to several months to really start seeing changes. And I think it's helpful when somebody has, if somebody like me, you know, a coach, somebody who's been trained in helping people get better sleep, to have that accountability and that support. Because I think sometimes we have these setbacks. Like I've worked with clients long enough so that I have seen their sleep get better and then they take a step back because of usually an external circumstance with their family. Honestly, it's just like, you know, that somebody died or somebody got sick and then their sleep suffered again and then they were able to get it back, right? So sometimes it's help. I don't want them to go through pain, but sometimes I'm somewhat grateful that they are going through a struggle while we're working together so that I can be there to show them that they can get back on track again. So it's not like forever it's going to be sliding downhill.
Right. If someone listening thinks like I've tried everything, what would you say is the one thing they probably haven't actually tried yet?
Let's see. Um, I think probably most people feel like they have consistency, but I think that if you really tracked your sleep wake times, I think most people would realize they're not as consistent as they think they are, which is why tracking can be a useful tool for a lot of people to really see. And then once you see that there's a lot of outlying sleep wake times, is bringing those in, dialing it in to just stabilize it even more. I think that's probably something that most people would be kind of shocked that to learn that they're not as consistent as they might give themselves credit for.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked about how healthcare professionals, doctors, especially in medical school, they're not getting a lot of sleep science training. What do you wish more healthcare professionals understood about sleep or insomnia?
I wish they would understand that pills are really just a band-aid solution. They really are. It's not the root cause, and it can take a lot of digging and a lot of investigation and work to get to the root cause. And ultimately, though, it's worth it because once you've figured out the situation, you can turn things around pretty quickly. But a pill is really, you're, in my opinion, you're just kicking the can down the road with a pill.
I only have two more questions, but the first one I wanted to ask is, you know, in this conversation, we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything we haven't covered? Is there anything that you feel like we've missed or that you want to talk about that feels like it should be said?
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Okay. Yeah.
I really do. And the things that we haven't covered are things that like I don't know a lot about. Like sometimes people want to talk about dreams and I don't know that. I that is, you know, some when I tell people I'm a sleep coach, sometimes they'll want to like talk about dreams. And I'm like, that's cool. Like I love talking about dreams, but like there's not any part of me that's been trained to like analyze your dreams or like go through this analysis. So that's for another guest.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting to think about how maybe dreams impact sleep quality. I mean, but
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, for people who have nightmares, that's something that, you know, I've talked to several people about who wanted to work with me, and their sleep was being disrupted by dreams. And that's not my training. So I'm like, okay, you need to go to a therapist and ask for image rehearsal therapy. So it's a therapy called image rehearsal. And, you know, haven't been trained on it, so I'm not going to do that with them. But essentially, you are during the day, we're kind of reliving the replayed nightmare that you have all the time, but you change the ending. And then And then the idea is that when you dream, the ending of your dream changes so that you're not really having the nightmare. That's sort of the loose explanation of it. But again, I don't, those are the clients that I refer to a therapist because I want to stay in my lane.
Yeah. You have a
But
very
yeah,
good sense of your own strengths and limitations. And just like a primary care physician, you refer out when
yeah,
you've reached the
yeah.
boundaries of your
I
knowledge.
mean,
Yeah.
and I've been so lucky, Dustin, to have met so many ancillary professionals in the sleep world that I feel so comfortable with referring that I just, I don't shy away from saying I can't help you because I feel like there's somebody I know who can help that person.
Yeah. Do you like this work better than your previous work?
Oh my gosh, I love this. Like, I love this work more than anything I've ever done. And I've had a lot of jobs. And I mean, I feel so rewarded and so privileged to be able to help people with such a fundamental issue that's affecting their lives. It's really just, it's life changing.
Yeah, because you can really transform someone's life if you can transform their health
Yes.
if you get their sleep better.
Amen.
That must be very gratifying to see someone struggling and 6 months later they're sleeping much better and feeling much better.
Yep. Absolutely. It has a ripple effect. It affects not only them, but it affects their families. So the family relationships get better. Their job performance gets better. There's this ripple effect that I don't even realize because our work has ended, but the benefits just keep going. It's awesome.
Yeah. So we covered a lot of ground, and I guess my last question is, what gives you hope about helping people with their sleep problems?
What gives me hope? I think the fact that I've seen a significant amount of people have transformations. Because in the beginning, like with anyone, they're just like, okay, can I help somebody? Right? I mean, I think any practitioner who's a newbie goes through that self-doubt, that imposter syndrome. But I think when you start developing a track record of identifying the people that you can help and then being able to help them, that gives me hope for sure.
Well, I want to thank you so much for talking about this with me. It's incredibly useful information. I'm going to try to not have the phone in my room tonight. Try it. And I'm going to get up and walk around in the morning. If people want to know more about your work and your sleep coaching, where can they go?
Well, my website is morganadamswellness.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, pretty active on both of those platforms. And I have the opportunity for people to schedule a free consultation if they feel like, I think I'd like to talk to someone.
Kick the tires.
Yeah. And again, like you said, if I can't help them and they've got a different issue than I deal with, and I've got referrals at the ready for them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Morgan. And I wish you the best in working with all your clients. Sleep well.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Curiously. I hope my conversation with Morgan Adams gave you something useful to think about. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's been fighting their own battle with sleep. And if you want to support Curiously, leaving a review helps more people find the show. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for more conversations with people I meet along the way.